Hello. So, my name is Ariel. I'm a certified public accountant in the state of Florida. And in this video, I want to go ahead and answer some questions that I get asked occasionally, some frequently asked questions regarding about being a CPA and some things about, more like what is required to become a CPA and is a CPA required to work in accounting, and some other various questions and topics that I want to discuss with you guys a little bit today. So if you are considering, getting a CPA license, or you're interested in what a CPA is, this video is for you. So CPA, as I mentioned in the beginning, stands for Certified Public Accountant. It is a specific designation via a license. Your license is per state. So in the United States, you're going to be licensed in whatever state that you reside, and you take the exams and you get certified in. And so if you move to another state, you will have to get certified in that state. And so so that's what gives you the ability to practice as a CPA. So let's talk about with that a couple additional questions. So do you need to be a CPA to be an accountant? And the answer is no. Unlike some professions where, like I think about lawyers, like you go to law school and then you have to take the bar exam and pass and become officially a lawyer to practice law. You do not need to be a CPA to be a practicing accountant. To be an accountant, that can vary per job. Some require a college education, some only require prior experience, or some just don't require any experience for maybe an entry-level position. So it really just depends, but being a CPA and getting that license is not necessarily required to, start out in accounting, neither in an industry role, meaning something that is like working as an accountant for an individual company, nor in public accounting. So in public accounting, you also do not need to be a CPA, at least on an entry-level basis. Sometimes with CPA firms specifically, while they won't require you to be, they will not require you to be a CPA starting out in order to get to a certain point, like usually like a manager or and above, so like managers, partners, directors, things of that nature. That's where they're going to require you to get a CPA in order to be promoted. But generally speaking, you do not need to have a CPA license to start practicing in accounting. And then another question is, how do you become a CPA if you are interested in getting licensed? So some of the requirements are going to vary per state, but in generally, there's like three parts of this requirement. And the first part is an educational requirement. And so that is going to be usually at a very bare minimum, you will need a bachelor's degree to become a CPA with 120 credit hours, which is usually that equivalent to a bachelor's degree. And then depending on the state, you may need 150 credit hours. So in the state of Florida, I needed 150 credit hours. So the way people get that, oftentimes they'll end up going into accounting on the master's level and getting their master's degree first. But also depending on if you maybe switched majors a couple times and maybe you have a lot more than the 120 credit hours when you graduate with your bachelor's, as long as you have those certain accounting courses, then you can also qualify if you have 150 hours. So it's a 150 hour requirement for some places, 120 for others, but usually within those you have to take a certain amount of accounting courses as well. So like if you decide to do some completely unrelated major, like, I don't know, like software engineering or something, just as an example, you may require some additional courses as well. So it's a certain credit hour and then some individual courses, like a certain amount of accounting courses within those 120 or 150 credit hours. So the first part is that education requirement. A second part is usually a work requirement, and this can also depend on state. It's usually like 1 to 2 years for that requirement. So like once you start working, you'll need to be able to have some professional work experience under your belt, and then you'll have someone sign off on your experience at work to certify that you've met that requirement before you can be licensed. And then the third part is a big one, is the tests themselves. So there's an examination to become a CPA. So you'll need the education requirement, and then you'll need the work experience, and then you'll need to pass your exams. There have been recent changes to the CPA exam in the last couple years. So some of those requirements have changed, and they're continuously changing. But there are, at least right now, there are 4 different exams in various topics and areas that you will need to pass in order to become a CPA. So education requirement, work experience requirement, and then last but not least, the exams themselves to test your knowledge and make sure that you're knowledgeable. Those are the things that you're going to need to become a certified public accountant. And I'll try to make another video that kind of dives more into those requirements and like what the tests entail and all that nature, and possibly in another video. But just like to understand, those are the basic requirements to get your license. So another question I get asked a lot is becoming a CPA worth it? From my personal experience, I think absolutely it's worth it in many cases. So why I think a CPA license can be worth it for many people is just for a more wide breadth of opportunities. If you're deciding to go the public accounting route and you plan on staying there for a number of years, then it's super important to get your CPA, because you won't be able to progress onto like a manager partner level. So if you know that you want to like rise through the ranks of the public accounting world, then a CPA is absolutely essential. Now, the more question is oftentimes, if you're going the more industry route, if you just want to be an accountant for an individual company, is a CPA required, or is a CPA worth it? So as we mentioned, it's not usually required, but is it worth it? And that can definitely depend. I think in many instances it is, especially if you want to be more competitive in the market. Like if you don't see yourself staying at one company your entire life, but you want to move around and you want to move up as well within an accounting department, then having a CPA license can definitely help. I think oftentimes when I've looked at like job postings, oftentimes it might not say CPA required, but it will say CPA preferred. And so if you do have your CPA license, you're definitely opening yourself up to a wider range of potential jobs that you can take. Now, again, it's not everywhere. It just really depends on what you want to do. But if you want to have the most doors open to you, I'd say absolutely. Absolutely, having a CPA license will open the most doors to you. But again, it is quite a bit of work, and oftentimes it takes people months and even years in order to get their CPA license, in order to like study for the exams and whatnot. And so it's not for everyone. You need to kind of like weigh the pros and cons, but generally speaking, at least for opportunity wise, I'd say it's absolutely worth it. I do want to say that if you're working in a company and you get your CPA license, I like to say that companies will automatically, give you like a huge pay increase or something. And honestly, I haven't seen that to be the case. Hopefully, maybe some of you have had that opportunity where you get your CPA license and you get a raise. Honestly, I've seen it be more helpful when like changing jobs rather than necessarily boosting your like earning potential at your current job. At least that's been my experience. However, again, which doesn't sound that appealing, but it really just depends on where you're working at. But if you want to move places, having that CPA can be a great negotiation tool to get a higher salary, in that way. So it really just depends. But I'd say generally, if you have the time and ability to study for the exams, get your CPA license. That's just my personal opinion. Does it prepare you to be an accountant? Yes and no. I mean, I think that a lot of accounting is very much experience-based. Like, you can have your CPA license, but that doesn't mean you're going to be super knowledgeable all of a sudden as a tax accountant or an auditor or just like an accounts payable person or a finance director or controller. I don't know. It's still, I think the actual experience over the years is the most valuable in helping you do your job. But having a CPA definitely helps you to understand the mechanics and of like why you're doing what you're doing, and understanding those generally accepted accounting principles a lot more. And so in that way, I think it's helpful. I think it's helpful to understand the concepts that you're doing on a lot deeper level. And I see this a lot, especially with like newer accountants entering like industry roles. You'll have your accounting software and you'll be putting entries in and different things that some of it's kind of automatic on the back end. But someone who's a CPA, particularly if you do have also public accounting experience, although not necessarily required, then you understand the concepts behind those accounting standards better. And there are things you learned in school too, but when you're studying for the exams, it definitely can help cement that a little bit more. But again, do I think it'll help you be better at your job? And personally, I don't necessarily think so. I don't know. I want to be careful because like there is a huge, some people perceive it as being very high value and some not as much. I definitely still think it has a value. It shows work ethic. It shows, a basic understanding and knowledge of certain concepts. And there's some advantage there, but I definitely don't think it's going to help you do your day-to-day tasks significantly better. But that's just my opinion. So there's definitely a debate on this here. But yeah, so that's one thing. And then kind of a small thing that it probably applies to more of you who are already in the process of finishing up your exams. But, the question is like, how long does it take to get your license once you finish your exams, assuming that you meet the other requirements of like education and experience. Usually takes like maybe a couple of weeks. It really just depends on how long it takes like the state to process your information. I believe for myself, so after I finished my exams and I had met, which at that time I had already met the other two requirements, I had to apply for my license online. And then I think it took about 3 weeks from the time that I submitted my application to the time that I received my like official license, like with my licensing number and all that stuff. So usually it'll take about a couple of weeks. So not too bad of a turnaround, but it does take some time for like the administrative side to get that all in order. But yeah. So another thing is like, is becoming a CPA hard? And we touched on that a little bit, that I did mention that there's a lot to it. The hardest part about becoming a CPA is usually the exams for most people. So I looked up a statistic. This is a couple years old now. So this is from the year 2022. So this is now the beginning of 2025 at the time I'm making this video. And I know the exams have changed a little bit, although it does seem that they keep pretty consistent on pass rates. But depending on which exam you're taking, there's an average pass rate of anywhere between like 40 and 60% according to the AICPA. And so that doesn't take into account how many times you've taken it. So you can take the exams numerous times, as many times as you need to in order to pass within like a given period. And so that's 40 to 60% pass rate for every time when people are taking exams. So almost half the people are failing an exam whenever they take it, whether it's your first time taking it or you've taken it several times. And the percentage, I don't know the exact number right now, but I know that the percentage of people who pass all of their exams on the first try is very, very small. It's very, very uncommon to do that. So if you could do that, that's amazing. But they are very, very difficult exams. There's just a lot of like tricky questions and things. So it's definitely not easy to become a CPA when you're looking at like exams. So those are just a couple things about like taking the exams. Whether being a CPA is worth it. If you have other questions about becoming a CPA, let me know in the comments, and I'd love to make another video to answer some of those questions. Have a great day.